Hello. So this is attempt number 2 because attempt number 1 didn't work. Yay! Okay, you can hear me. That's great. I'll just quickly message Bill. Phew. Oh, that was a terrible start. I'm so sorry about this. I selected the wrong microphone because I recently changed how the microphone's plugged in and stuff, and yeah, I didn't figure it out by myself. So as I've just said, Bill's actually as of today he's visiting his family in the UK. So I just had to quickly message him, bless him, and he well, he helped me, as he always does, with technical problems. But anyway, now we're here and it's Victober. And let's see if I can remember how I started earlier. So I think I started by introducing my horribly orange drink. Definitely not authentic Victorian. This isn't even Aperol. This is knockoff Aperol from Aldi, but it's good enough. And also with me, I have my Victober reading. So I thought today it's just going to be a little casual catch up. You can tell me if you're drinking anything or how you're celebrating the start of Victober. It's I don't know, joined with Jane Austen July, probably my favorite readathon tradition. And I had a quick look back at my channel, and I did actually do Victober back in 2018. So this is going to be my 4th Victober. Yeah, just excited to get started again. Today I didn't have loads of time to really dive into Victorian literature, but I did start my first Victober read, and that is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is a book that I am a little bit nervous for because I didn't like the last Gaskell book I read, which was North and South. But this one has a very different vibe to it. So I only read the first chapter today, and it seems very sweet, very mellow, very casual, and very sort of slice of life so far, which I really enjoy. As a historian, I'm always interested in the sort of everyday life of people of the past. And in Cranford, we get all of the little things that I nerd about, like people eating and drinking and talking, the sort of conversations they have, but also down to practicalities like, I don't know, cooking and sleeping and just living in the Victorian period. And this sort of time travel aspect of reading classics it's a big draw for me, and I'm definitely getting loads of that in Cranford so far. So let's just say hello to everyone who's in the chat. I'm surprised that there's so many of you there because this was a very spontaneous kind of idea. I hope you've got something to drink as well. You know, it doesn't have to be cheap alcohol from the supermarket, but get yourself something nice, maybe a cup of tea, coffee. If you're in America, it's middle of the afternoon right now, isn't it? Yeah. Have you started reading already for Victober, or are you still looking forward to that? Do let me know. Another book I wanted to start today but didn't get to is Do the Obscure. Yes, apologies again for the cat's protection sticker. When I held this book up in my last video, loads of people told me to use a hairdryer on it, but I don't know if you can tell, I don't actually own a hairdryer, so we're just gonna have to live with the sticker. Oh, Bill has just joined us. Hi, Bill. Yeah, thank you. You should go to bed. You haven't slept since Wednesday. Hi, Kate. Oh, Ina says you started The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which is one of my favorite ever Victorian novels. I hope you enjoy it. It's a bit of a slow start, and it is kind of it's very clearly split into, I would say, 2 large sections with one little section at the end. So stick through it if you find it a little bit hard going to begin with, but it definitely picks up in after probably first quarter or so. But yeah, anyway, I wanted to start Jude the Obscure today, but unfortunately didn't get to. I will start this one tomorrow, though. And I have not yet read any Thomas Hardy, so this is the first time I'm reading the Thomas Hardy. Alice says, yay, it's the book about the man in a hat. Yeah, gotta be, right? Yeah, so I talked about this book in my TBR video, and loads of you said, yeah, that is actually one of the more depressing Thomas Hardys, after I mentioned how I'm a little bit nervous to read Thomas Hardy because I heard it's quite dark and dreary. So apparently I've picked the worst of the bunch, the most depressing Thomas Hardy. Kate Howe said that, she put it very elegantly. She said that Thomas Hardy to her, Jude the Obscure to her is like Wuthering Heights to me. So it's absolute least favorites. And I'm just curious to see if I agree with that or not. I don't mind a depressing book. I don't mind a dark book. So, you know, if it's well written, that's going to be fine. Catherine says, I've been reading during my work breaks, started Bleak House and The Way We Live Now. What's The Way We Live Now? I'm not familiar with that title. Who wrote this? What's it? I've not heard of that book before. Bleak House I've not read yet. I'm really woefully underread when it comes to Dickens. I've only read Oliver Twist and A Christmas Carol. So every Victober nearly, I think, oh yeah, this year I'm going to read a new Dickens. But I haven't so far, and I couldn't fit it onto my TBR this year. I wanted to make a realistic TBR with, 5 books instead of 15, because I'm really not going to get through loads and loads and loads of books. So Dickens is going to have to be moved to next year, probably. Another book that I want to start soon, maybe not definitely not today, but maybe not just this week, is Dracula. And I found an audiobook edition that is read by different narrators, because Dracula is an epistolary novel, so you've got different voices, different people writing to different people, and the audiobook that I found has different narrators doing each voice. So I expect that's going to bring a little bit of life into it, rather than have the same narrator read all of the letters, which I've also listened to epistolary novels that were read that way, and I didn't mind that, but it'll be interesting to see. So I've just realized the ice is just melting away in there. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that brings to the audiobook. Oh, Anthony Trollope wrote The Way We Live Now. Okay, he's another Victorian author that I really need to get to one day, but there are so many of them. As much as I love classics, the Victorian period is one that I'm not as familiar with as, say, the early 20th century or the early 19th century, in fact. So, so I need to read more Victorian books, and especially by the sort of big names like Trollope, like Wilkie Collins, like Charles Dickens, and Elizabeth Gaskell. Helen says that Dracula cover alone is enough to give you nightmares. This is so horrid. It's an absolutely ugly cover, and I'm gonna name and shame, right? Because it says here who designed the cover, and Robert Matthias. Oh, with that name. Oh, no, actually, no. It says cover design by Robert Matthias, but it does say cover illustration by Jonathan Barry. So, Jonathan, what's this about? What's this about? I mean, I get it. He doesn't sleep. But bit grumpy. Probably a bit cold. Hungry. Like, I mean, I probably shouldn't be talking about his hair looking as I do right now. But sometimes I wonder whether Wordsworth Classics actually intend to sell the books they design, because they are in a competition with themselves to make the worst looking classics covers in existence. Absolutely horrendous. Emma says, wow, October already. Yeah, I know. It came around fast this year. I am not ready to let go of summer, by the way. And I don't have to, because here it's actually still quite warm. I went out for a walk earlier and it's much warmer outside still than it is in my apartment. So for the moment, I'm still enjoying walking around without the jacket and stuff. But yeah, and I know it's coming. Also, Alice said that they just got the game is afoot t-shirt in the post. This is I'm wearing the jumper version of that, which is my Sherlock Holmes and Cats design. Just a little plug there. I actually had to re-dye this one because I don't know if you can tell here. There's a stain here, and that is because when I was last visiting my wonderful mother, she had, for a reason unbeknownst to me, decided to wipe her kitchen table with bleach. And then, me being me, I messed up my sleeves on it, because who wipes their kitchen table with bleach? So anyway, this has been through some stuff, hence why it looks dirty. It's not dirty, it's just faded because of the bleach. Alice says it's so cold here all of a sudden. Are you in the UK? Because it's the UK is currently going through a cold spell, which it tends to do that, doesn't it? I'm quite lucky where I live in South Germany that it is generally speaking quite warm. Oh, if you're hearing noises, by the way, it's just the cats having a little play around. Maybe they will bless us with their presence on screen. Yeah, UK. Alice says UK. That's what I thought. So maybe you're better off with some sort of hot drink. One thing I really do not miss about living in Wales is the weather. As beautiful as Wales is in terms of landscape, the weather is just never good. Cats, you think you could keep it down a little bit? Of course I can't. It's not cold enough in the winter to be a proper winter, and it's not warm enough in the summer to be a proper summer. So it's always just kind of wet and 12 degrees, like year round. Catherine says in Scotland it's cold and wet. Oh, I can imagine. I'm hopefully going to see Scotland for the first time, maybe in the upcoming year. We'll see. And Helen's in the East Midlands, and it was quite warm in the garden. Okay. That I think you just got lucky there. From what I understand, it's freezing pretty much all over the UK. But that is also the perfect weather, I think, for doing some reading. I've spoken about 3 of my TBR books. The 4th one that I've got in paper, I also have here. And I really treated myself to this one. This is the Penguin cloth-bound edition of The Picture of Dorian Gray. And I've seen these all over Instagram and all over Booktube. People love the Penguin cloth-bound editions. And after buying one for the first time, I totally get it. I understand why people love these. Because The Picture of Dorian Gray is a book that is evidently nearly impossible to do a good cover design for. Pretty much all of the secondhand versions of this book that I've seen feature what was at the time the ideal of a good-looking young lad. And that means that you get some hilarious, like 1970s style mustaches, 1980s style, hair and stuff. I don't know why it's so difficult to make a good-looking cover for The Picture of Dorian Gray. So yeah, I treated myself to this one, which thankfully does not feature a pretty boy on the cover. But instead it is just really, really gorgeous sort of fin de siècle design. And on the inside, it's beautiful as well. Just like really nicely printed with a lengthy introduction. And something I really appreciated, don't know if you can see it, I don't know if the camera's going to focus. Anyway, it says, introduction. New readers are advised that this introduction makes the detail of the plot explicit. Guys, it's a spoiler warning in the introduction to a classic. I love this. I hate it when classic fiction assumes that you've already read it. And then you get a book, you read the introduction, you get spoiled in the first sentence. I hate that so much. So I, out of principle, pretty much never read introductions of books before I've read the books. This one, it's an old favorite of mine, so I'm familiar enough with the text that I don't feel like I need to skip the introduction. But I really appreciate that they give you a spoiler warning. You know, more of that, please. Penguin's doing it right. Yeah, as well as the spoiler warning in the introduction, you also get a chronology of Oscar Wilde's biography, as well as further reading. So a bibliography for, you know, secondary literature on this, and a really, really good notes section. So you get footnotes, you get, you know, little explanations for places and things that are mentioned in the text that just explain it a little bit better if you're not too familiar with late Victorian life, like I am, you know, not. Fully Booked says, yes, normalize spoiler warnings and classic intros. Yeah, I would put that on a t-shirt. Finally, an intro with the spoiler alert, says Michaela. It wasn't so difficult to add, was it, guys? No, and it isn't. It's just this kind of snobbery that is so prevalent in classics publishing. This idea that you don't read a classic for the plot, therefore the plot is not important. Therefore, we can tell you what the plot is because you read a classic for some sort of higher truth about humanity, or you read a classic to analyze the language, or whatever they think that people pick up a classic for. And it's what do you call it? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a spiral. It leads to people not picking up classics for the stories. It leads to people not realizing that classics have a story, and it just kind of separates classics out from other literature, which I don't like. To be fair, the plot of The Picture of Dorian Gray. Okay, let's not get started there. I don't want to spoil anything in this video. But yeah, I appreciate that Penguin is making the effort to appeal to new readers as well as to, you know, old readers and people who already know everything about every classic. Yeah, people in the chat saying they don't read the intros either, and I don't, generally speaking. For this one, I am reading it. I haven't even finished reading it yet. I haven't actually started reading the novel, so I'm just reading the introduction. And it seems fine. I mean, it hasn't really added that much of interest to me, but, you know, it doesn't have to. It's just an introduction. This book I'm starting on the 16th of October. I'm actually doing this as a group read along, which I am hosting with Jack from the channel Spread Book Joy. And okay, I will add a link to the description box of this live stream when we're done with the live stream. There is a Goodreads group if you want to join us. And there is also a Instagram hashtag. The hashtag is Dorian Gray 2021. Gray with an A, by the way. Yeah, great, like that. So Dorian Gray 2021 is the hashtag for the read-along. It starts on the 16th and it goes to the 25th. So it's a 10-day read-along. It's a short book. It doesn't look like it because there's lots of padding in this one, but it's about 200 pages. So if you want a little casual read-along of a late Victorian classic, then do join us and check out Spread Book Joy as well for her announcement video. So this is probably the book I'm most excited to get to because I haven't read that for 3 or 4 years. I last also read it during Victober, and it's a comfort read for me, which is weird because it's not a very comforting book. Oh, Jim says he read The Canterville Ghost during last year's Victober. What did you make of that? It is genuinely one of my favorite Wilde stories, and I think one of the most underrated Wilde stories. It's a short story or a novella. It's not a novella. It's not long enough for that. It's a short story, and it is quintessential Oscar Wilde because it combines the humor that people love about his plays, his comedies, it combines that with the sort of melodramatic side, with the sentimental side of his writing that you get, for example, from his fairy tales or from The Picture of Dorian Gray. This is a very melodramatic book. And I enjoyed the combination of those two, where you get the humor. This is, the sort of making fun of, well, frankly, making fun of Americans. And it combines that with a sort of super dramatic, sad ghost plot. I love it. The Cant of a Ghost is a recommendation if you've not read it yet. Transylvania asks, at what age did you start reading Victorian era books? So actually, Oscar Wilde was my introduction to Victorian. If we're talking Victorian literature, by the way, I mean British and Irish literature. Because obviously I started reading German classics in school and some outside of school. But if we're talking English language classics, I probably started when I was 14 or 15 and got introduced to Oscar Wilde specifically in English class in school. I had one of those teachers that sort of, you change your life, but you don't realize it until much later. And he really pushed us when it came to English. Normally if you're 14 or 15, you've been learning English for 3 or 4 years in school, you would not be expected to read something like an English classic. But he really pushed us. And I pushed back. I was a terrible student. And I was in detention a lot. Now, detention with this teacher looked like having to show up an hour early, which means I had to be in school before 7 a.m. It was my fault, right? I got detention because I was a brat and I didn't do my homework. But for detention, he liked to make us translate texts. So I'd sort of shown an interest in literature. I mean, I was already a massive reader, and he knew that. He knew that I liked to read and I liked books. So when I showed up for another detention, he made me translate some boring newspaper article from the New York Times. And I refused because I was a brat. I'm not proud of it, but, it got me into classic literature. So there you go. So then he dug out an Oscar Wilde. And actually, the Oscar Wilde he dug out, this is interesting, it was from Salome, which was originally actually written in French. So he made me translate an excerpt from... Can you hear this? My cats are rioting, and they have been fed. So he made me translate an excerpt from Salome, which, by the way, so as I said, written in French, it's a play. I don't know why he picked that one. I assume he just had it on his bookshelf. And I translated that, and I really liked the literature. So then the next thing that I read, and again, he was, like I said, one of those teachers. He was lending me books, and he lent me an essay collection. And the first essay I read by Oscar Wilde, and the first essay was The Portrait of Mr. W.H. Emma says, best detention of your life. No, did you miss the bit where I had to be in school at 7 a.m.? I hated it. It was the worst. But yeah, so the next thing I read was The Portrait of Mr. W.H., which, why did he give me that? I don't know. Sorry, I'm going to crunch on some ice here. Apologies for that. So The Portrait of Mr. W.H. is an essay about Shakespeare sonnets. I hadn't read a Shakespeare sonnet. I barely understood it. So I printed this off the internet, the early internet, from the family computer, and took a dictionary to it. Another dictionary, by the way, that this teacher lent me. And I translated it nearly word by word because I did not understand it. And it was a challenge for me to do that. And somewhere, I haven't prepared it for now, but if you're interested, I can maybe do a video just about that thing. I've still got the print off of The Portrait of Mr. W.H. with my penciled in translations in a desperate attempt to understand this essay about these sonnets that I hadn't read. So that was my introduction to Victorian literature. I think the next author I read after that was Charlotte Bronte. I think after I'd started reading Oscar Wilde and I read Jane Eyre. I can't actually remember if I read that in German first. Probably not. I think at that time, when I was sort of 15, 16, I started reading books in English without having read them in German. And with my trusty dictionary, I got through them okay. Obviously, I missed loads and loads and loads of it. I didn't, it's always like that when you read books in a second language. It takes a few readings to actually understand them. And then after Jane Eyre, just trying to remember if anything pre-Booktube really spoke to me in terms of Victorian literature. There must have been. Oh yeah, Sherlock Holmes, of course. Yeah, I enjoyed some Sherlock Holmes as well. Though now we're talking about already my early 20s, so that was after school. Like I said, I'm not super well read in Victorian literature. In terms of classics, I prefer the period before and after. And Victober is the perfect opportunity to expand my repertoire, as it were, and to expand into the kinds of authors that I think of as Booktube Victorians, like Anthony Trollope, like Elizabeth Gaskell, even like Wilkie Collins. These are authors that, if I wasn't on Booktube, if I wasn't watching people like Kate Howe or like Katie from Books and Things, people who really passionately talk about these authors, I wouldn't know about them. I wouldn't know who Anthony Trollope was. But Booktube kind of makes them part of the Booktube canon, if you want to call it that. People enjoy these books because there are so many booktubers talking about them. And I want to get in on the conversation. I want to see what the hype is about when it comes to Trollope. Kate House's Booktube is just the best. Yeah, and Kate, your channel is such a big part of why we talk about Victorian literature at all on Booktube, right? Because Victober is just this opportunity to really dive deep into these novels that aren't quite obscure, but they're also not the big hits, if you think of Victorian literature, the books that are maybe talked about. Oh, speaking of talked about, if you are in the UK or you have access to UK media, I saw that In Our Time, which is a program on BBC Radio 4, did an episode about the tenant of Wildfell Hall. So if you enjoyed the tenant of Wildfell Hall, you might want to listen to that. I haven't listened to it yet, but I have enjoyed previous episodes of In Our Time that were about books. So check that out. If I remember it, I'll put a link in the description box as well. So, authors like the Brontes are talked about a lot more in outside of Booktube, more than other authors that maybe deserve to be talked about just as much. Jennifer Brooks says, you're on point about the Booktube canon. So many books I would never have picked up or even heard of. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's why I love Victober so much. And at the moment, I'm definitely not contributing to the Booktube canon. The books I picked this year are very, very mainstream, very sort of typical, very traditional Victober picks. But maybe in future years, when I dive a little bit more into the sort of obscure ends, which I have done in the past, by the way, I have picked some really quite obscure books that haven't even been printed. I mean, obviously they were printed back then, but haven't recently. And I enjoy that as well, experimenting a little bit. But this year, I want to play it safe and read some of the Victober best of. Alice is planning to listen to the Radio 4 thingy after reading. Yeah, I would recommend that, because I do think they go in quite spoilery usually when they talk about books. And Angela says, I'd never have heard of Elizabeth Gaskell if it were not for Victober. And now Wives and Daughters is one of my favorite books. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. I also had never heard of Elizabeth Gaskell pre-Booktube. I don't know which Booktuber first mentioned it or where I first heard it. I assume it was either Kate or Katie or Lucy, one of the Victober hosts. But those are the kind of, the authors that that you don't discover unless you have something like Victober to shine a big spotlight on them. So I'm very grateful to that, and for that, and I'm really excited to explore these books because, like I said, since we're talking earlier about how I got into Victorian literature, I did buy an Oscar Wilde complete works edition, and I read it cover to cover, and that includes the horrible poems, the really, really cringy poetry, but that gives me a very sort of detailed understanding of his writing. But that doesn't, for example, that doesn't expand my understanding, obviously, of other writers. So yeah, the other Victorian author that I really, really loved is Anne Bronte, and she's someone I only discovered 2 or 3 years ago when I first read The Tenant of Wildfire Hall, and it makes me so sad that she only wrote those 2 novels. The Tenant of Wildfire Hall and Agnes Grey, of course. I read Agnes Grey last year, and I really liked that as well. So yeah, it's a shame she didn't write more. But I'm sure there are more authors like that out there that I know I'm going to love, and that, just need to be discovered. Maybe Thomas Hardy is going to be my new Victorian favorite. Jim says, I'd only heard of Elizabeth Gaskell only as Charlotte Bronte's biographer pre-Booktube. I read Mary Barton in April. Yeah. I mean, now I know that Elizabeth Gaskell wrote a Charlotte Bronte biography, but I had never heard of Elizabeth Gaskell at all pre-Booktube. And Emma says, I'm pure book only. Podcasts or movies never, for me, gets to the same connection to characters, etc. Yeah, I like other media as well. I listen to a lot of podcasts. At the moment, actually, I'm listening to music more than podcasts, but I do like podcasts, and I do like movie adaptations as well, mostly, though I prefer miniseries because I have such a short attention span that if you put me in front of a television for 90 minutes, I'll probably fall asleep during that time. And Jennifer thinks I will really get on with Thomas Hardy. I really hope so, because obviously he is another one of the really big names when it comes to late Victorian fiction. Yeah, so I'm really excited to read, well, 2 new to me authors, Dracula and Jude the Obscure. And then next year to dive into Trollope and more Dickens. And you know what? I've just realized that basically I just need to read more Victorian men authors, because I tend to gravitate to female authors. And that's no different when it comes to Victorian literature. So I think we're going to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes or so. My glass is nearly empty. And I've talked about all of the books, and I've talked about teenage me being a horrible brat and getting attention all the time. It's a shame that teacher passed away some years ago, because I wonder what he would think, knowing that now I'm a massive fan of English classics, and that he has a very large part to play in that. Do you have any questions or anything you want me to talk about? I'll have a little look at the chat for the next minute or so, and see where that goes. Oh, Jim says starting with Hardy's last novel is a strange way to go. Yeah, you're not the first person to point that out. My novel selection process is, what did I find in the charity shop on that day? And clearly I picked up this from Cat Protection at some point. And so this is the Thomas Hardy book that I had lying about. And so this is the one I'm reading. Also, I am buddy reading this with Andrea, and this is one that she hasn't read either. So, we coordinated it in a way that we could both read a book that we hadn't read. But yeah, often, people are a bit surprised by which books I pick from authors. If I have like the free choice, for example, if I buy a new book, or if I get an audiobook or an ebook, then I'll usually pick the most popular book by an author, the most recommended, the one that's kind of top of the list. But in this case, I had this secondhand edition, and I want to get this off my TBR. I want to get this read. So yeah, maybe a bit of an odd choice. And if I don't like this one, I'm definitely going to give Thomas Hardy another chance. Just like I'm doing with Elizabeth Gaskell, even though I didn't like the first novel of hers that I read. Transylvania says, I cannot recommend The Mayor of Casterbridge enough. Okay, I'll bear that in mind as well. I will check it out. Probably not this year, but I will. And Transylvania says, feel free to monetize your live chats. I don't know how to do that. Honestly, not a clue. Look into it though. Oh, before I go, actually, let me just plug the Spotify playlist again. I know I did this in my TBR video as well, and I've posted about it on social media. But if you want to listen to some Victorian music, I did put together a Spotify playlist, which I will link after this live thing is over. I'll link that in the description box. So it's a Spotify playlist I put together of music from the Victorian period, but not just from Britain and Ireland, but from all over the world. And it's all instrumental music composed by women, because I think we should listen to more classical music written by women. And there is loads and loads of it. I managed to put together I think 34-hour-long playlist of instrumental music written by women from, I believe, 30 different composers from all sorts of different countries. There's obviously a lot more women composers than those 30, but a lot of them have not been recorded, and a lot of the ones that have been recorded have not been put on Spotify. So anyway, if you have a Spotify account, do check out that playlist. And yeah, listen in. Even if you don't listen to classical music, you might want to put that on as an accompaniment to your reading. I think it sets the mood beautifully. It's a good mix of orchestral music, solo piano music, chamber music, even to some rather funky things, like there's a concerto for organ accompanied by brass orchestra on there. All sorts of things. Composers you have heard of, like Clara Schumann and Fanny Mendelssohn, to loads of composers that you probably haven't heard of, because I hadn't heard of them either. So yeah, check out the playlist. Again, after this live chat, I'm going to put it in the description box. So if you check in like 10 minutes or so, it's probably going to be there. That was my plug. And I'm going to say goodbye now. I hope you have a wonderful Victober, and enjoy your reading, enjoy listening, enjoy sitting at home wrapped in a warm blanket if you are in the UK at the moment and you are going through the cold spell. And yeah, happy Victober. I'm glad you could join me for this spontaneous little chat. Bye.